Hey guys, what's up? This is False Bulls 123 and this is day 59 of our daily quarantine vlog. So I'm thinking about, just since we're sort of getting further into the quarantine, I want to start having sort of weekly daily vlogs. By which I mean there is a day every week or at least one day a week where I have a similar concept. I've already been doing Shrematune and music corners, and I've been trying to do a few other things. That way, there's similar content, and I'm not stretched for ideas. One thing I think I'm going to start doing just for at least the last couple of weeks of this, because it's still probably going to be a week or two before I can actually go back to work, is simply doing kind of a weekly reading vlog where I'm kind of talking about the books I'm reading, and it's just any of the stuff that's really interesting me. So I've only finished one book recently from my last reading vlog, and that was a short story actually. So I don't know if that's cheating. I mean, are there any rules about it? I don't know. I did not see a big old tome called BookTube Rules anywhere. So if I am in the wrong and I'm a piece of shit, oh well. But it's it was on my reading app that I use, Libby. They have these always available section, and there's always been this short this book called what is it called, Ryan? Have you forgotten the book's name already? Yes, I have. TBR Not TB, or To Be or Not to Be, basically, like the Shakespeare quote. And it was a short story written by Kurt Vonnegut. And I'm like, okay, I like Kurt Vonnegut. I've never read any of his novels, but I've read a couple of his short stories and I liked them. I thought they were peak sci-fi. And so I'm just like, okay, I'll download it. It's 10, 15 pages or whatever. It's going to be a short read. I'll just read it before I go to my mom's place or something. And so I finished that up yesterday. My parents had me get there early because they needed some help with some stuff, and so I just kind of sat down and finished it up while I was waiting for Dad to wake up from his nap. And it was really good. What is it about? Pretty much it is this utopian future where everyone there is a limited population limit. Population control is not an issue. It's post-scarcity. Everyone has as much food as they want, and everyone kind of lives forever. But if you want to bring a child in this world, if somebody wants to be born, somebody has to volunteer to die. And so that's kind of the premise. And so pretty much in this new world, death is kind of a meaningless thing. And so they have these organizations, basically, which are pretty much just state-run, death houses, where you go in, they, what's the phrase? Euthanize you, and that's basically how people die in this world now. No one really dies by accident anymore. I think the quote was, death is a, let's see, barring accidents, death is an adventurer's game, or something. And I thought that was such a cool little quote. But pretty much it revolves around this guy where this person who has triplets. And so he's trying to figure out how he's going to keep all these triplets and stuff. And so it's a pretty short scope. One thing I really love about 50s and 60s sci-fi is a lot of the short stories around the time were very poignant. They were always supposed to, a lot of people who were writing sci-fi back then were looking for what our future is going to be like. How are we going to deal with things like population control and overpopulation and post-scarcity and all these different issues. And so a lot of the sci-fi back then was discussing these options. Should we colonize space? Do we have these dystopian futures where there are no resources, or all these sort of messed up utopian futures where there's always a catch? And that's one thing I think is really interesting about dystopian utopian fiction, is that there is always a catch. Even if you're looking at the original Utopia, the namer of the term, that, and now I haven't read it, but I've heard of synopsises, the entire premise of that society was based on a slave class. So there's always going to be either a disenfranchised party in it, I guess moral system is not valid for all, or there's going to be some sort of, there's always going to be a catch that prevents it from being a perfect utopia. You have to give up something for everyone to be equal. And I think that is always what makes, dystopian fiction really interesting because there's never really any true utopia. There's always something in the works. Anyway, moving on with that point is just I thought it was a pretty interesting short story. It had a lot of just really great sort of 60s, 50s sci-fi feel, and I don't want to say anything more about it because that's pretty much the premise. They live in a world where you can literally call up somebody and be like, "Hey, I want to kill myself," and they're like, "Okay, come down," and we'll euthanize you. So it's like a reverse suicide hotline, and it's just a very interesting and kind of disturbing, look into this concept of what a world would look like if there was no issue of population control or overpopulation. So I'm gonna skip on from that because I really can't say more without spoiling it. And what else have I been reading this week? Oh my goodness. So I've been reading two books. I finished sort of my last line of books. Trying to think. Yeah, because I finished reading Red, White, and Royal Blue, which I'm not going to talk about. I want to save some of the books that I've been reading for my wrap up, so that there's some mystery. Though you could obviously just check my Goodreads if you wanted to. And let's see, I read the Five Love Languages, which also I'm going to say for the wrap up. So I'm kind of into a new sort of phase of the reading where I've turned in the books I've read, and now I have a new couple books to slam. So the way I try to do it, my reading habits right now is that in the mornings when I'm doing yard work, I'm listening to audiobooks, and I'll usually listen up to lunch, and then I usually film in the afternoons after lunch, which is what I'm doing right now. Hey, yay, back to the present. And then I'll usually be reading my ebook because I don't really have that many physical books. I don't want to get a lot of physical books right now while my room's a mess and I have no place to put anything, and my bookshelf is been overcapacitated for since I was in high school. But so I'm reading ebooks right now. And so I either read some in the morning, sort of around when I wake up, but I'm not ready to get up, or I'll usually read a little bit at night before I go to bed, and I really like those periods of time. They're nice, they're lace about time, and they're relaxing, and I can get really into things. So I'm trying to think which one I want to start with first. I'm going to start with my ebook just because I like my audiobook more and I want to end the video on a high note. So my ebook I've been reading has been, what was it called? One of Us is Lying. Don't remember who the writer is. I'm sorry, dear, but you'll see it when I put the book cover there, so you'll know. And what is One of Us is Lying about? Pretty much, imagine Pretty Little Liars meets The Breakfast Club. I've seen Pretty Little Liars, I have not seen The Breakfast Club, and if any of them are books, I have not read them. There we go, for my biases. But pretty much you have these four kids. You got your, let's see, you got your jock, your popular girl princess, I think that's what they call them. You got some nerd, and then you got your delinquent, drug dealer. The four corners of high school. I don't necessarily really like high school stereotypes or clique mentalities and such stories. I'm not that big into Mean Girls. Mostly because the high school I went to, everyone was really chillaxed. I think mostly it was because we had a lot of extracurricular cross-pollination, basically. You would have cheerleaders who were in theater and in band. You would have jocks who did fine arts things or in the speech and debate club. Basically, our school didn't really discriminate between extracurricular sports and other things. And so there was a lot of different cross-pollination. I don't necessarily think that I was ever popular because I'm not that type of personality, but I did know a lot of people because I am a social butterfly. So I think that, I knew a lot of people from all these different clubs. I knew everyone in student government. I knew everyone in the FA building. So it's I got around in high school, but we didn't have cliques, which is apparently a lot of other people's experiences. So I really can't relate to these sort of nerd stereotypes. Because most of my nerd friends were really entrenched in all of their activities, and they were in a bunch of different things. And so I don't think you kind of watch these high school dramas and stuff, and you always get this sort of sense where you have these anti-intellectual jocks, and you have all these other people who and there's all these weird biases and conflicts, and I've never seen that in my educational experience, so I can't relate to that. And I don't like relating to that because I think it's dumb to put people into these like tiny little boxes. Because, oh, you have a specific interest tied to like one of the various fields you're good at. Boom, bitch, that's your personality. And I'm thinking, that's bullshit. And so now that I've had a very long diatribe about why I dislike the whole jock nerd cliche is in high school dramas, what is the book about? So you got your four Breakfast Club characters, and then you get to meet the interesting character of the book. I'm joking. Simon, who is pretty much like the Pretty Little Liars portion. He runs like this gossip column on this like app that he's developed, which okay. And basically all he does with his life is play like a little bit of that Mr. Body and just pretty much tell everyone like, he rakes the mud. And he's like, yeah, that bitch, she got an eating disorder. Yeah, that kid, he's a cross-dresser. And it's like, first of all, why the fuck would you ever out somebody like that? That is disrespectful. And second of all, like, why all this fucking like, why are you a piece of shit human being, really? But you kind of get the sense that he does this because he likes the power of, like, knowing everyone's dirty little secret. And I'm thinking, honey, it's called blackmail. And that's a lot nicer than, like, just exposing people without getting anything out of it. Like, if you're going to be evil, do it fucking right, Anyway, and then he, like, he's drinking some water, and he straight up fucking dies because he had a peanut allergy, and there was peanut oil in the cup. And you're like, okay, this is Essie. That boy was murdered. And that's where we're on, like, in the story right now. So, pretty much the central conflict is them, like, the four kids being in a murder investigation for killing this kid that had a lot of enemies because he was a fucking gossip monger. And so you get to, like, you think, oh, wow, they're probably, like, all flat people in the service and they have no dark secrets. But then you totally find out they each have a dark secret. And I'm thinking, wow, who would have seen that coming? Now, I'm being kind of mean and vicious, but it's like, plot-wise, it's a little on the nose, in my opinion. Okay, so it's like the nerd. Oh, her big secret has to do with, like, academics. Let's see. The popular girl. Oh, wow, her, like, dark secret has to do with relationships. Who would have guessed that? And it's just, everything, like, that kind of happens is definitely playing a little bit, like, too into, like, the character type. I think that, like, it's a good read. It's palatable, but at the same time, it is very set in its tropes, for lack of a better phrase. You have these characters, they have conflict, they have depth, but the depth is still very tied into these overarching archetypes of who they're supposed to be. Because, yeah, like, let's see, the nerd character, Bronwyn, is just, you understand why she's driven. She has some backstory. She's having, like, a little bit of the fling with, like, the drug dealer dude. But at the same time, her whole personality is still very, like, what's her face? Like, that girl, that overachiever girl from Glee? It's basically her, but Hispanic. And it just plays a bit too on the nose for me. I'm going to give it a 3 because it's deep enough not to be called generic, but it still isn't unique enough to sort of step out of those tropes. I don't feel like there's a big enough diversion to really say that it is not that trope heavy, because it is. It is very intensely trope heavy. And if I read this when I was younger, I probably would have liked it a lot more, but right now I am probably just like really at a medium 3, because it's good enough not to get anything lower, like it's written well enough by which I mean, but at the same time, it's like that focus on the trope heaviness, on just sort of like, very obvious characterization. And then they keep making and then there's like a couple like really obnoxious, like millennial jokes that are just not funny. Like, near the beginning of the book, let's see, Addie, she's the popular girl's boyfriend, it's just like, what's an incoming call? Tee-hee. Millennials don't take calls. They only text each other on their apps. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, you totally understand the plight of people my age. And come on, people. Another small issue I had with the book was they have this character who's like a little bit of a hacker, tee-hee. And she's like, yes, so I obviously indexed this character's, like, internet handle with his 4chan accounts. And I'm thinking, do you not know what 4chan is, sweetheart? unless I am mistaken, because I am not, like, the king of the internet, one of 4chan's main, like, features is its use of anonymous users. Basically, 4chan is known for having anons, or basically various people all using a different random serial number as the identifier. And that's kind of the thing that makes 4chan such kind of like a fucked up place sometimes, that you have complete anonymity. So people talk about, like, being a Columbine stan or something, because that's what they're into. That doesn't stop Tumblr from being almost as shitty, but, like, kind of the thing about 4chan is that they're all anonymous. He doesn't have a username on 4chan. That's not how it works. That's not how any of it works. And I just feel like that's a really, really big, like, factual error? I believe that's what would be a factual error. And it's just, come on, sweetie. Come on. Do your fucking research. Besides that, I'm liking the book. I kind of want to know what, like, Cooper, the baseball star's, like, secret is. Because I bet it's going to be something a bit zesty, because I just being a fucking tease about it. Anyway, because I'm, like, maybe a third of the way through the book, it's a bit big. Next up, what was the last book I've been reading today? Well, not today, this week, whatever. It's an audiobook, and it's by Holly Black, which the name sounded familiar to me, but I don't think I've ever read a book by her specifically. And I was doing a little research, like I does, and I found out that Holly Black was actually one of the co-writers of the Spiderwick Chronicles. And I'm thinking, that's fucking cool. Like, I love the Spiderwick Chronicles. And she's like, yeah, bitch, but now I'm doing young adult. And I'm just like, ooh, you're doing young adult? Well, I mean, you gotta. I'm not the biggest into young adult. Like, even when I was, like, in middle school and high school, I was reading things like Ray Bradbury and Stephen King. So it's like, I didn't really, like, had that big scene where, like, I was reading things like Full Frontal Angus and Full Frontal Snogging, like, whatever, like, those books are called. But it's like, I was reading, like, horror, pretty much. And, like, sci-fi anthologies, because I'm a fucking nerd. And so I didn't, like, I'm not as familiar with, like, a lot of contemporary or young adult. And the sort of young adult I read was usually dystopian young adult. So it's like, I read The Hunger Games, I read Divergent, which, you know how I feel about that. And so that's sort of like, where I'm at. And I forgot the name of the freaking book. Sorry, it's called The Coldest Girl in Cold Town, which, points for the name, that's bitching. What is it about, Ryan? Basically, it's like iZombie, but with vampires. Ooh. So pretty much this girl, her name's Tanya, she wakes up in a bathtub after, like, a house party. And I'm thinking, okay, my college experience. Not really. But, like, so she goes upstairs, and whoopsie daisy, all of her friends are dead. Don't you just hate when that happens? Like, you have this bitching party, vampires break into the house, suck everyone dry, and, like, go to sleep in the basement, and you wake up and all your friends are dead? I hate that. It's absolutely sucks. Totally relatable. And so, like, she's exploring the house, and she walks into this room, and she sees her piece of shit ex-boyfriend, chained to the bed. And she's thinking, wow, this is some creepy BDSM going wrong. But then you find out, oopsie daisy, her piece of shit ex-boyfriend, Aiden, he's almost a vampire. He's, like, preliminary vampire. He's down with the sickness, but he's not up with being the undead. And so she's, like, thinking, well, great, now I have to deal with his emo bisexual ass now. And so she's like, what am I going to do? And then in the corner, like, she sees something stirring. And wait a second, what is it? Is it secretly hot, mysterious, paranormal bad boy? Yes, it is. And I'm thinking, Holly Black, you sick son of a bitch. I know what this is. And that's a motherfucking love triangle. And I'm like, ooh. Because by this, and I don't love triangles. I am a rom-com bitch, so it's like, if you have some, like, fun, zesty, like, rom-com shenanigans, I'm down. But half the time when I'm reading young adult, you'll have, like, it will be just some really basic bullshit. You'll have the one guy who's, like, total hottie, totally, like, chemistry, it makes perfect sense, and you're like, you should get with that person. But then there's always some random simp fuckboy who's like, hey, I just walked into your life, like, yesterday, you want to go make out or something? And I'm just like, no, bitch, get yourself some dick you can have a conversation with. Fuck off with these losers who you've just met. You ain't got no chemistry with them. You ain't got no history. You ain't got any high school classes with this bozo. Why you simping that hard, honey? And it's like, I don't like that. But it's like, by that point, I was already really enthralled in Holly Black's writing. It was so well written for like what I think young adult usually is. And I feel that it's such a dig at the genre, but I feel a lot of the writing, a lot of time in young adult can be a bit juvenile. But her writing has like a lot of metaphor and just imagery, and it's zesty. And it made me feel oh woo. And so it's like, I was getting caught up in like, this sort of world building and story and like sort of like suspense. And then she's just like, wait a second, boys. Fuck boys. And I'm just like, hell yeah, Holly Black. You bring in that romance angle. I want to see what does. And so, next thing you know, she's on like this road trip. She's going towards a cult town, which is basically these quarantined like internment camps for the vampires and like infected, which are basically people who have the sickness but they haven't like consumed like blood yet and becoming a vampire. So they technically are kind of, they basically have this like giant craving for blood, but as long as they don't feed, they could technically be cured, but nobody ever lasts that long. And so basically they start like, heading on down to like, the cold town, which is sort of like, the oldest one. And they meet these two kids. The names are Midnight and Winter, and they're they're straight up vamp kids. There is no denying that they are vamp kids. I should also mention at this point that Aiden is very emo. They mentioned that he has like long swooping black hair, Vans, skinny jeans, and a black and white checkered belt. And I'm just like, I'm pretty sure that's emo unless I don't understand like, fashion anymore. But that is possible. And so it's like, pretty much they all start heading down and they're just like, yo, we want to go in the quarantine place. And all of them like, guards or whatever, are just like, you dumb kids, you're gonna die. And they're just like, we don't fucking care. Let us the fuck in. And they're just like, fine. And so pretty much right now she is in like, Vampire Town basically. And she wants to get out, but she's not sure if she's like infected right now because she kind of like, ran into an incident with a vampire at the beginning of the book. And so she's like to see if like, she's going to let the sickness consume her and become like one of the living dead. Or is she just going to like, have a bad run of like, Train Spotted and see some babies on the ceiling, So she ain't sure what's happening. And that's when you kind of get into like more of the young adult shenanigans where like, you have this vampire guy and he has like this whole history I'm not going to spoil, but it's super zesty. You have her ex-boyfriend who just turned and you're like, Aiden, you piece of shit, stop being a fucking slut and help somebody in this situation. And he isn't going to because he's too busy being a hoe. And then, like, this now a mystery third guy, and I'm just like, ooh, what's going to happen? He sounds like he got a chick, but like, let's see where this takes us, boo. And so, there's a lot of things that I'm really liking about the book. I'm liking the young adult aspect. I think it plays it really well. Because, like, it's that little bit of that sexy without being, like, explicit. Because all like she's ever done is, like, maybe kiss a couple dudes. But it's like, you kind of get the implication that, like, that's hot. And so, she's got, like, that sort of, like, thing. But it actually works for the story. Because each of the characters aren't, like, super explicit love interests that she has to choose between. They're just people that she has history with, or that she thinks is kind of cute. And so it works, because it, like, the characters aren't reduced just to being her love interest. And that's so fucking sexy. I hate young adult, where there is a love triangle, and the only reason there is a guy in the story is so that she can hop on that. And it's like, why don't they have agency? That's so dumb. If they're not useful for the story except to get in your pants, why are they in the story? I don't care about your love life if it doesn't help bring down the empire. That's what I'm saying. But like, they actually have an important part to the plot, and they have a reason to build there, and they help with the world building and all this other shit. And so another thing I like is Tanya, the main character, is really interesting. She has a personality. She has a backstory that helps both world build and give her specific motivations that, like, give her a unique edge over other characters. She has a history of vampires and vampirism, and so that makes it really interesting, her thoughts and experiences and feelings towards, like, turning. And I think that's super fucking cool. They also have just a really zesty world building. It's just, I could totally imagine, like, this world being in, like, a TV show or a movie, and I would watch the fuck out of that. It is just such good young adult, paranormal, technically romance? I don't know. I'm not really sure the difference between paranormal, like, whatever paranormal romance is, but it's good. And I am loving it. And even though I'm, like, not listening to the audiobook, I kind of want to listen to the audiobook. And I usually don't really have that very often, but I am really enjoying this experience. I don't usually like young adult. I like paranormal, but I've never really been into vampires. Like, maybe it's just everyone gushing about Twilight that made me think it was a little overhyped, but I've never really been like, a vampire bitch. I'm just like, I get it. You suck some blood. It's a little kinky. It's an analogy for banging. And it's just, okay, whatever. Because I just feel like it's always been a bit overplayed a lot in, like, media. Which is weird because I'll totally, like, read a comic about zombies, and zombies have definitely been overplayed, but whatever. And so I'm really liking it. I should mention on that note, the book came out in 2013, so obviously that's why obviously paranormal was, like, sort of the big thing back then. So it made sense for the genre at the time, but it's so freaking good. It is like some young adult Patricia S. Briggs, like Devin Monk, like bullshit. It is just zesty and fantastic, and I'm just like, why have I not, like, read Holly Black before? Honey, like, new recruit, like, just fantastic. So you can obviously tell how I feel about that book. I really, really like it. And I'm going to give you more opinions about that when I do my wrap-up, hopefully in a couple weeks. Maybe sooner, that'd be nice. Maybe later, not as nice. But, yeah. I don't really have anything else that's too zesty for, like, the upcoming week. Mostly just, I'm going to be doing that music corner that I was going to do yesterday, but decided to just, like, blow off and talk about horror movies. And I think I'd like to do some Let's Play later in the week. I don't have, like, very much planned. So hopefully you enjoyed that. I've been trying to do more editing. I've been trying to do more posting. And I know I'm super freaking behind. But it's a process, you guys, And I have a lot of stuff that I do every day. Like, I do my yard work. I'm, like, caretaking for my mom. And so I don't always have that much time, like, in everything that I'm doing to actually sit down and edit for 4 or 5 or 6 hours to, like, catch up on everything. And I'm trying my best, but it's difficult. Because, every one of my videos is usually like 20 to 30 minutes long because I like to talk about my stuff that I enjoy. And so it's hard. It's hard to contain myself and not just go on and on about my favorite things. But I'm trying my best. Anyway, guys, I'm going to head out. I want to do some editing today. Actually catch up on that because I've been slacking. So, this is False Bulls 1, 2, 3, and I'm signing off.